Anxiety is often experienced as an unwelcome visitor, a trembling in the chest, a tightening in the stomach, or a restless mind that refuses to settle. Most people instinctively want to push it away, to silence it, or to mask it with distraction, routine, or numbing behaviors. Yet, as Irvin D. Yalom explores in his work Existential Psychotherapy, anxiety is not merely a pathological symptom. It is an existential alarm, a wake-up call from life itself, signaling that something essential demands your attention. This perspective reframes anxiety from a problem to be eradicated into a guide that points toward growth, meaning, and transformation. The first step in understanding anxiety as a transformative signal is to recognize that it often arises at moments of confrontation with fundamental human concerns. Yalom identifies four ultimate concerns: death, freedom, isolation, and meaninglessness. These are not mere philosophical abstractions. They are lived realities that press upon the human psyche. Anxiety emerges when these realities clash with our defenses, routines, or illusions of control. For instance, someone may experience a vague, persistent unease in their daily life and only later realize that this discomfort originates from the recognition that their current path lacks purpose, or that they have been avoiding crucial decisions about their life direction. In this way, anxiety functions as a messenger, alerting us to areas of life where avoidance or denial has taken root. Psychologists such as Rollo May and Viktor Frankl complement Yalom's perspective by emphasizing that anxiety is inseparable from freedom and choice. May describes anxiety not simply as a reaction to external events, but as a response to the responsibility inherent in being free. To feel anxious is to sense the weight of possibility, the knowledge that every choice has consequences, that each path we take shapes our existence. Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, echoes this by highlighting that suffering becomes meaningful when it points toward an authentic engagement with life. In this sense, anxiety is not an enemy. It is the body and mind's way of signaling that we are confronting the gravity of our existence. Yet the transformative potential of anxiety is only realized when it is not suppressed. Modern society teaches us to seek comfort, predictability, and distraction. We medicate, scroll endlessly on our devices, or immerse ourselves in busyness to avoid the discomfort. However, Yalom warns that avoidance merely prolongs the underlying tension. The alarm persists because the message remains unheeded. To engage with anxiety is to listen attentively to its signal, to ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What truths about my life, my choices, or my relationships am I avoiding? By reframing anxiety as a messenger, individuals can transform their relationship with their own discomfort from one of resistance to one of curiosity. This awakening process often begins subtly. A sense of unease may nudge someone to question a stagnant career, a faltering relationship, or a neglected passion. It may appear as restlessness, insomnia, or irritability, signals that the soul is stirring beneath the surface. Yalom's case studies in existential psychotherapy illustrate individuals who initially viewed anxiety as a defect or illness, only to later recognize that these symptoms were gateways to greater authenticity. One patient described his chronic tension as an internal alarm that forced him to reconsider the life he had constructed according to others' expectations. In listening to this alarm, he discovered creative passions, more meaningful connections, and a sense of purpose that had long eluded him. The key to harnessing anxiety as an instrument of transformation lies in awareness and intentional reflection. Mindfulness practices, journaling, and therapy can all serve as tools to uncover the messages embedded in anxious experiences. Rather than labeling anxiety as a failure of resilience or a flaw in character, the individual learns to see it as an intimate guide, Each anxious moment is an opportunity to pause, to observe the underlying concern, and to consider how to act in alignment with one's values and deepest aspirations. Ultimately, reframing anxiety as an existential alarm invites a radical shift in perspective. What was once feared as a sign of weakness becomes recognized as evidence of vitality. Anxiety indicates that life is pressing against the boundaries of comfort, that we are being called to expand, to confront truths, and to engage more fully with our existence. By approaching anxiety with curiosity rather than resistance, individuals can transform discomfort into insight, fear into opportunity, and unrest into a pathway toward growth. As Yalom poignantly notes, it is not the avoidance of anxiety that leads to fulfillment, but its conscious embrace as a signal that one is on the threshold of change. Anxiety, in this view, is not a problem to be solved, but a compass pointing toward the life we are meant to lead. Anxiety often acts like a mirror, revealing truths about ourselves that we might prefer to ignore. While the existential alarm signals that something in life demands attention, the mirror shows us exactly where our inner conflicts lie. These conflicts are rarely simple. They can involve contradictions in values, hidden desires, unresolved grief, or lingering guilt. In Yalom's work, particularly in existential psychotherapy, he emphasizes that anxiety is deeply tied to these internal tensions. When we observe our anxious reactions carefully, we often uncover layers of the self that have remained unacknowledged, waiting quietly until the pressure of discomfort forces them into awareness. Consider a person who feels anxious about their career. On the surface, the worry might seem related to job security, deadlines, or financial stability. Yet, as Yalom and other psychodynamic thinkers illustrate, the anxiety may reflect a deeper struggle, perhaps a conflict between personal ambition and family expectations, or a suppressed creative longing that has never been pursued. In this sense, the symptom is not the problem itself, it is a reflection of unresolved tensions that need to be explored. By treating anxiety as a mirror, the individual begins to see beyond the surface of everyday stress and glimpses the authentic concerns of the inner self. Jungian psychology adds another dimension to this understanding. Carl Jung spoke extensively about the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we disown or repress. Anxiety often emerges when aspects of the shadow demand acknowledgement. It may show up as irritation, restlessness, or obsessive thoughts, each signaling that something within has been denied expression. In the therapeutic process, engaging with these reflections allows the person to integrate these hidden parts, leading to a more cohesive and authentic sense of identity. Anxiety becomes a guide, not a foe, pointing toward reconciliation within the self. Yalom also explores the concept of existential isolation, the sense that ultimately each person must navigate life's challenges alone. Anxiety frequently reflects this tension. It exposes our fear of being misunderstood, abandoned, or disconnected, yet it also illuminates our deep yearning for authentic connection. By reflecting on anxious experiences, individuals can identify patterns in their relational behavior, uncovering how past experiences, expectations, or fears influence their current interactions. The mirror of anxiety, then, not only reveals inner conflict, but also offers clues for growth in relationships and self-understanding. Moreover, anxiety is rarely static. It evolves as the inner landscape becomes more complex. A single anxious episode may reveal multiple layers: fear of judgment, reluctance to confront personal limits, or dissatisfaction with life's trajectory. Yalom demonstrates that therapeutic engagement with these layers allows individuals to translate anxiety into insight. Instead of viewing it as an obstacle, the individual begins to see each anxious moment as a message from the self, illuminating areas that require attention, compassion, or change. This approach cultivates a sense of agency, enabling one to make choices grounded in authenticity rather than avoidance. Integrating this awareness into daily life transforms the way one experiences anxiety. Instead of responding reflexively with avoidance, suppression, or distraction, the individual learns to pause and observe the mirrored reflection. Questions like, "What part of myself is trying to be seen?" or "Which inner conflict is emerging through this anxiety?" guide the exploration. Each encounter with anxiety becomes a subtle invitation to self-discovery, offering an opportunity to resolve inner contradictions and align actions with personal values. The transformative potential of this perspective is profound. By seeing anxiety as a mirror rather than a threat, individuals can move from confusion and fear toward clarity and purpose. They learn to accept the discomfort as a natural signal that inner work is needed, understanding that confronting these reflections ultimately fosters resilience, authenticity, and personal growth. As Yalom notes, anxiety is the natural consequence of being alive, and the signal that something essential within the self is demanding attention. By embracing the mirror, we not only see ourselves more clearly, but also step toward a life that is more integrated, intentional, and meaningful. Once we begin to recognize anxiety as both a signal and a mirror of our inner conflicts, the next step is learning how to engage with it rather than avoid it. Avoidance is the default human response. We distract ourselves with busyness, substances, digital screens, or superficial comforts. We tell ourselves that if we ignore the anxiety long enough, it will disappear. Yet, Yalom, in existential psychotherapy, warns that avoidance is ultimately futile. Anxiety persists because it is tied to unaddressed existential concerns, and only through conscious engagement can it be transformed into a pathway for growth. Engagement with anxiety begins with acknowledgement. It requires the courage to sit with discomfort, to observe it without judgment, and to inquire into its source. This may be the first time someone truly confronts the tension that has been simmering beneath the surface of their life. As Yalom explains, existential anxiety is not a sign of weakness. It is a reflection of living authentically and recognizing the responsibility inherent in freedom. By avoiding anxiety, we avoid confronting the very choices that define us. By engaging with it, we reclaim the power to shape our lives intentionally. Therapeutic approaches offer practical guidance on this engagement. Techniques from humanistic psychology, mindfulness, and existential therapy encourage individuals to attend to anxious sensations as messages from the self. Mindfulness, for example, teaches one to observe anxiety with curiosity, noting bodily sensations, racing thoughts, or emotional intensity without immediately reacting. Journaling or reflective dialogue allows these feelings to be externalized and examined. Over time, this process diminishes the perceived threat of anxiety, replacing fear with insight. Anxiety often signals the presence of unmade choices, suppressed desires, or unresolved conflicts. For example, a person may feel persistent unease about a career or relationship, but avoid confronting it due to fear of failure or social judgment. Yalom emphasizes that this avoidance traps individuals in lives dictated by obligation or habit, rather than authentic purpose. Engagement requires asking difficult questions. What am I afraid will happen if I act? What opportunities am I missing by staying comfortable? What aspects of myself am I denying? Facing these questions transforms anxiety from a paralyzing force into a motivating one. Importantly, engagement does not mean rushing into action without reflection. It means a deliberate confrontation with discomfort, coupled with thoughtful exploration. In Yalom's clinical examples, patients who initially resisted their anxious feelings eventually discovered that embracing these moments led to profound self-awareness. A man struggling with the fear of isolation, for instance, found that by confronting his anxiety, he could examine how his avoidance of vulnerability had shaped his relationships. By choosing engagement over avoidance, he accessed a deeper understanding of himself and strengthened his capacity for meaningful connection. Transforming fear into opportunity also involves reframing the narrative around anxiety. Instead of perceiving it as an enemy, it becomes a guide pointing toward areas of growth. Each anxious episode highlights decisions that matter, values that need alignment, and personal boundaries that require attention. The key is to interpret these signals as invitations rather than threats, which opens the door to proactive change. This reframing aligns closely with Yalom's existential perspective. Discomfort signals the presence of life's weighty choices and the potential for authentic living. Engaging with anxiety ultimately fosters resilience and agency. It empowers individuals to navigate uncertainty, confront difficult truths, and make decisions aligned with their values. Avoidance may provide temporary relief, but it perpetuates a cycle of unease and stagnation. By contrast, conscious engagement transforms anxiety into a source of insight, creativity, and personal growth. As Yalom notes, facing anxiety is not a surrender to fear, but an embrace of life's possibilities. In this embrace, anxiety is no longer a burden to bear, but a compass guiding toward transformation, opportunity, and a richer, more authentic existence. Once anxiety is embraced as a signal rather than a threat, its hidden potential begins to emerge. Anxiety, paradoxically, can be one of the most potent catalysts for creativity, insight, and personal growth. In Yalom's existential framework, awareness of life's finitude and uncertainty often fuels deeper reflection and artistic expression. Anxiety brings a heightened sense of attention and urgency, compelling us to examine ourselves and the world more closely. This heightened awareness, when channeled consciously, can generate innovation, problem-solving, and meaningful self-expression. The link between anxiety and creativity is well documented across both psychology and literature. Historically, many artists, writers, and thinkers have described profound tension or existential unease as a driving force behind their work. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, illustrates how suffering and inner struggle, when approached with awareness, can become sources of insight and purpose. Similarly, Yalom suggests that the discomfort produced by existential concerns, the inevitability of death, the responsibility of freedom, the isolation of the individual, can serve as a spark for transformative reflection. Anxiety, therefore, is not merely a disruption of life. It is a form of inner energy seeking direction. Creativity does not require grand artistic endeavors. In everyday life, anxiety can inspire innovative solutions to problems, new approaches to relationships, or courageous life decisions. A person feeling anxious about a career may begin to explore latent passions, develop skills they had previously ignored, or rethink their priorities entirely. Anxiety, in this sense, functions like a pressure valve. It compels action and invites exploration, provided the individual is willing to engage with it rather than suppress it. The intensity of the emotional experience enhances perception, deepens focus, and encourages unconventional thinking. Yalom emphasizes that existential anxiety is intimately tied to the search for meaning. When we confront the reality of our limitations, finitude, and responsibilities, we are forced to consider what truly matters. This confrontation is inherently creative because it challenges us to reimagine our lives, construct authentic narratives, and make intentional choices. Each anxious moment becomes a point of reflection, a chance to question routines, evaluate relationships, or reframe goals. By translating tension into insight, anxiety becomes a teacher, guiding us toward clarity and self-understanding. Moreover, the creative potential of anxiety extends to emotional and relational insight. Anxiety often illuminates underlying fears, desires, and values that may have been previously ignored. By observing these responses, individuals can better understand themselves and others. For instance, noticing anxiety in social interactions may reveal hidden needs for connection, recognition, or authenticity. In turn, this awareness fosters empathy and strengthens relationships, allowing for more genuine engagement with the world. In this way, the creative aspect of anxiety is not confined to intellectual or artistic domains. It permeates the fabric of lived experience. Harnessing anxiety creatively requires a willingness to tolerate discomfort and remain present with difficult emotions. Mindfulness, journaling, reflective dialogue, and therapeutic engagement are practical tools that facilitate this process. Yalom's clinical examples demonstrate that patients who confront anxiety directly often unlock new perspectives, recognizing patterns and possibilities previously hidden. The act of naming, exploring, and reframing anxiety transforms it from a force of paralysis into a source of insight, decision-making, and personal evolution. Ultimately, the creative potential of anxiety lies in its dual nature. It is both unsettling and illuminating. When ignored, it breeds tension and stagnation. When embraced, it catalyzes reflection, innovation, and growth. Anxiety becomes a lens through which life is observed more clearly, revealing opportunities that might otherwise remain invisible. As Yalom eloquently notes, the confrontation with anxiety is not a curse, but a portal to the most authentic and creative engagement with life. By learning to harness this energy, individuals can transform inner tension into profound insight, finding in their own discomfort the seeds of personal transformation and meaningful action. Anxiety is rarely experienced in isolation. It often emerges most vividly within the realm of relationships. Whether with family, friends, colleagues, or romantic partners, our connections serve as mirrors that reflect our deepest fears, insecurities, and unfulfilled needs. Yalom, in his work on existential psychotherapy and group therapy, emphasizes that relational anxiety is an essential pathway to self-understanding. By observing how anxiety arises in our interactions, we gain insight into both the patterns we carry from past experiences and the authentic desires of the present moment. Consider the anxiety that surfaces in social interactions, anxiety about being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. At first glance, it might appear as mere social awkwardness or nervousness. However, from an existential perspective, these anxious reactions often reflect deeper concerns: the fear of isolation, the longing for authentic connection, or unresolved conflicts from past relationships. Yalom asserts that our relational anxieties are signals pointing to what matters most to us. By attending to them, we uncover the values, vulnerabilities, and aspirations that define our interpersonal lives. Relational anxiety can also highlight patterns of avoidance or defense. For example, someone might feel intense unease when intimacy deepens, prompting withdrawal or distraction. This anxiety mirrors an internal conflict between the desire for connection and the fear of vulnerability. Jungian and psychodynamic perspectives reinforce this understanding, illustrating that early experiences, childhood attachment patterns, family dynamics, or formative losses shape the ways we perceive closeness and risk. Recognizing these patterns allows individuals to engage in relationships with greater awareness, fostering authenticity and emotional resilience. The therapeutic space, as Yalom describes in his group therapy work, provides a unique environment to observe relational anxiety in action. Within a group, individuals witness the dynamics of trust, confrontation, and mutual reflection. Anxiety that arises in this context offers immediate feedback about interpersonal patterns and unresolved internal conflicts. By exploring these reactions with curiosity rather than defensiveness, participants gain insight into how their fears influence behavior, communication, and relational choices. In essence, relationships become mirrors that reflect not only who we are, but also who we have the potential to become. Engaging with relational anxiety requires courage and deliberate reflection. It is not enough to simply recognize the discomfort. One must consider its source, its triggers, and its meaning. Questions such as, "What am I afraid of losing?" or "Which part of myself am I hiding in this interaction?" guide this exploration. By approaching anxiety as an informative signal, individuals can cultivate more meaningful, authentic connections. The discomfort, once viewed as a threat, transforms into an opportunity for growth, empathy, and relational clarity. Furthermore, relational anxiety can catalyze change beyond the individual. When we confront our fears within the context of connection, we open the possibility for mutual understanding and emotional reciprocity. Vulnerability in the face of anxiety fosters trust and deepens bonds. Yalom often emphasizes that group or relational experiences reveal shared human concerns, reminding us that we are not alone in our struggles. By engaging consciously with relational anxiety, individuals not only gain insight into themselves, but also contribute to healthier, more empathetic relationships. Ultimately, anxiety within relationships is a mirror reflecting the internal and interpersonal dimensions of our lives. It exposes fears, illuminates desires, and signals areas where authenticity is needed. By observing, understanding, and engaging with these signals, we transform anxiety from a disruptive force into a guide that fosters personal and relational growth. As Yalom notes, our anxiety in relationships is a lantern revealing the paths toward connection, intimacy, and meaningful engagement. When approached with awareness and courage, anxiety in relationships becomes not a limitation, but a portal to deeper understanding and connection. Having explored anxiety as an existential alarm, a mirror of the self, a gateway to engagement, a source of creativity, and a reflection within relationships, we arrive at the final and most crucial step: integrating the message of anxiety into life. Anxiety, when understood and embraced, is not merely a symptom or disruption. It is a transformative force that signals the possibility of authentic living. Irvin Yalom consistently emphasizes that existential anxiety is intertwined with the human condition, and responding consciously to it allows individuals to navigate life with intention, courage, and clarity. Integration begins with awareness. Each experience of anxiety carries a unique message about values, choices, and neglected aspects of the self. Reflecting on these experiences enables individuals to identify patterns, unfulfilled needs, and latent possibilities. Yalom often illustrates through his clinical work that patients who face their anxieties intentionally uncover profound insights about their priorities, relationships, and aspirations. The process of integration requires acknowledging anxiety as meaningful rather than dismissing it as a nuisance or weakness. In this acknowledgement lies the first step toward transformation. The next step is reflection and deliberate action. Anxiety invites us to examine whether our lives align with our core values and desires. It may highlight areas where we have compromised authenticity for comfort, habit, or social expectation. For example, one might feel persistent unease in a career, relationship, or lifestyle, and upon reflection, realize that these choices have been made to satisfy others' expectations rather than personal fulfillment. Through conscious engagement with anxiety, individuals can make informed decisions that align with their true selves, transforming fear into motivation and stagnation into movement. Integration also involves cultivating resilience and emotional flexibility. Anxiety, particularly when it arises repeatedly, can feel overwhelming. However, Yalom's existential perspective suggests that learning to tolerate and work with these feelings strengthens psychological resilience. By acknowledging the presence of uncertainty, mortality, and relational vulnerability, we develop the capacity to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Anxiety, in this context, becomes a teacher, offering repeated lessons about courage, patience, and self-awareness. Importantly, integration encompasses both the internal and relational dimensions of life. Awareness of personal anxieties allows individuals to engage more authentically with others. By recognizing how anxiety shapes reactions, communication, and relational patterns, one can cultivate empathy, honesty, and connection. Yalom's work in group therapy demonstrates that shared exploration of anxiety fosters a sense of universality, reminding individuals that human concerns are common and that connection is possible despite fear and uncertainty. Relational integration reinforces personal integration, creating a holistic approach to transformation. Finally, integrating anxiety requires a philosophical shift, viewing discomfort as a companion on the journey of life rather than a hindrance. Anxiety signals that life is being lived consciously, that the individual is navigating the tension between freedom, responsibility, and meaning. As Yalom states, the confrontation with anxiety is not merely a personal challenge, it is an opportunity to engage fully with the reality of existence. By embracing this perspective, each anxious experience becomes a doorway to self-discovery, purpose, and authentic living. The message of anxiety is clear. Growth lies on the other side of discomfort, and transformation is born when we heed its call. Through this process, the individual moves from a reactive existence dominated by fear and avoidance to a proactive, meaningful life shaped by conscious choices. Anxiety ceases to be a source of suffering alone and becomes a compass guiding toward authenticity, creativity, connection, and personal evolution. In embracing anxiety, we honor the complexity of our existence and step fully into the transformative potential of being human. Life, in all its uncertainty and fragility, becomes richer, more intentional, and profoundly more alive. If you found these insights on anxiety and personal growth meaningful, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a journey into the mind and soul. Share your experiences in the comments. How has anxiety guided you toward growth? Your story might inspire someone else to see fear as a signal rather than a barrier. And remember, each new video is an opportunity to explore life's deeper questions together. Don't just watch, engage, reflect, and return, because growth is a conversation we continue every time we connect.